All right. Well, Paul, another week and some news this week, which really caught my eye, was Apple making some layoffs. So this one a little bit quiet, but one which I really paid attention to because Apple almost never make layoffs. While everyone in tech, obviously with Meta, Google, and all manner of companies making gigantic amounts of layoffs over the last 12 months or so, Apple were conspicuously absent from that, or inconspicuously absent. But then recent news out of them is that they made some layoffs in their retail division lately.
Yeah, welcome back, Mal. We still don't have a name for this, so
We
let's
don't.
keep working on that. Yeah, I think you're right. Like, so we're looking at. I'm reading an article in Bloomberg at the moment, which is talking about this quite newsworthy topic that Apple has made layoffs, and I can't see the amount. They do say that it's a small number of people, but as you point out, it's more the fact that they do it because I don't actually think they've ever done it.
Mm.
But they've moved from 164,000 employees, then didn't expand as quickly as they otherwise might have, and then Amazon and Google have cut thousands of jobs, and now Apple has joined. So it's more the fact that they just don't do this.
Mm.
What do you reckon's happening?
Well, I think a lot of it is that we obviously had a couple of years there where, particularly in the tech and e-commerce and tech and retail, I should say, and particularly online retail, were really overheated through the pandemic, as we all know. I think the valuations for some of those tech companies got to like extraordinary numbers. You need to remember that it was probably like only about 12, 18 months ago where Facebook was $1 trillion company. Now it's a
Mm.
fraction of that, right? So a lot of these companies got really overheated. It was a very frothy market, as they say, with a lot of people online, a lot of people spending, and a lot of people advertising online. So as a result of that, a lot of these companies expanded quite dramatically. Amazon, peaked out at over 1 million people. I think there might still be over 1 million employees, which is just insane to think about that
Wow.
they hire like a small state.
Mm.
There's a size of South Australia
Mm.
could fit Amazon,
Wow.
right? That's how big they are. So there's been all these companies grew a lot, and with the expectation that tech retail, was going to continue to grow as well. And what you kind of see is that it grew, but then it also has now contracted as well. So that growth, has really slowed down. And you
Mm.
can see Facebook, Shopify as well last year, making a lot of layoffs as well, in line with the fact that retail has not grown as much as they expected it to. Like it's still
Mm.
growing as we talk about, like it's growing 5%, but that's way down on the 36% and 24% growth
Mm.
we saw in 2020 and 2021.
Mm. And what I think what's interesting is it appears that Apple have made the cuts from their retail divisions. And the article here puts it down to, I don't think there's any surprises here, but sluggish spending. So, reading between the lines, sales are down.
Mm,
Or let's say not down. I don't know if Apple sales will ever be down, but maybe not growing as fast as we can.
mm,
And as it can. And I think what that highlights, I mean, look, you sort of know what's happening when there's layoffs, right? Like, I don't think it's a tremendous surprise. Like, you're not making as much profit as you otherwise thought you would. And so they're putting it down to streamlining. So that's cool. It's doing some streamlining. But letting go of staff really just means that we're trying to make more money. We're trying to increase our profits because we're not making as much. Now, a little bit worrying when companies like Apple do that. But we saw great companies do it. And Shopify did it last year as well en masse. There's I feel kind of in two minds about this because you're 100% right, like that frothy market. And I guess there was a whole bunch of companies that got it wrong. Just thought that this ride will last forever. Maybe a little bit of drinking the Kool-Aid and thinking that we are, what's the word, we can't, we're recession proof. I guess we're exempt from this. And the best companies in the world are not. But on the other side, it does highlight something for me, which is something that some businesses just don't want to face. And that is when the going gets tough and you want to increase profits, it's easy to increase profits by cutting costs. Roger Corbett, the old CEO of Woolies, said this 15 years ago or something, talking about declining sales. It might have been the GFC. And he was talking about, someone asked him, are you worried about profits because your revenue's slowing because people aren't spending? And his answer was, well, there's more than one way to increase profit. In other words, take it from the expenses. And so it's not nice to streamline, but it does highlight that wages are likely to be your biggest expense, along with marketing in a typical business, like maybe tech, probably even more than marketing, potentially people. Um, but, I guess sometimes big decisions do need to be made. And look, they've got stakeholders to report to, and a lot of companies actually do put the blinkers on and keep going for quite some time without making those big moves. So I guess they probably had to do it. It's a sign for me that if these big companies are doing it, us smaller guys and online retailers or tech companies have to pay attention to that. Like nobody's immune from it. And it's a sign, I think, Mal, that things have well and truly cooled.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, with successive interest rate hikes, we're up to like, 10 or so interest rate hikes in a row. Yes, they may be pausing now. I think all that's actually catching up. I think a lot of retailers are actually suffering a bit of a much slower April as well. Yeah, and really
Mm.
starting to see the fact that growth has slowed a lot. Like it was already slowing, but I think in the last couple of months, and this month in particular, post Easter, I get the feeling that it's been particularly slow for a lot of retailers, really struggling to recover from that post Easter slump as well.
Mm.
So I think it's a sign that overall the market is cooling. But kind of going back to the layoffs, so obviously there's the human element of it is one which you shouldn't take lightly because
Mm.
you are talking about people's livelihoods here. You're talking about people's lives. So it's not one to take lightly. But at the same time, a lot of it is like when you talk about cutting expenses and what Roger Corbett said, yeah, the two ways. And like in marketing, it's always like you're going to cut the marketing spend. First thing you do, you cut the marketing spend, but then everything slows down. So as marketers, we always talk about you actually need to keep spending
Yeah.
through the dip, because most people will cut that spending. But if you actually persevere and continue down the path, you can actually come out of it stronger. I think the other side of the people side goes back to like that the wages as a percentage of your total revenue. Like how
Mm.
heavy are you on wages? And when you plan for that growth which doesn't come and you hire for that growth which doesn't come, it can put you in a really precarious position, as well, which is what a lot of these companies did. They hired for expected growth, but
Mm.
really, really ambitious expected growth. And when that didn't come, suddenly you're talking about like wage bills just sitting like 20, 30, 40% of gross revenue, which
Mm.
is a huge sum, if you're not careful. So I think some of that is like looking at, okay, well, it's not just cutting expenses. In many ways, I feel it's also kind of right sizing the business.
Mm.
Similar to what I can't remember, what was the word you said Apple used?
Streamlining.
Streamlining. Yeah, right sizing. I think right sizing is the other way to
Right
say it.
sizing. Yeah.
That you don't necessarily like, we don't need all these people. We made all these hires, we don't need these people. Or as Mark Zuckerberg has said this year, it's the year of efficiency, and Meta. And I think they've laid off another 10,000 people in the last week,
Yeah.
or so.
Well, process over people. And I think it's when that's a couple of good points there. Like I think, when you see a company go on a hiring splurge, it's generally not because they're making more sales. It's generally because they're anticipating something or they've raised capital. And I don't know what it is when there's a capital raise that people go out and feel that they need to double their workforce. I just don't understand it.
Or
And
just
then
spend
how
more.
many yeah, they're just like, oh, we've got to spend the money. They're like, well, so and the thing about hiring people is, I've heard all of these things about, oh, well, I'm hiring for growth, and I see this a lot, right? And you would too. You sort of say, oh, look, you're spending a bit much on what your wages. Yeah, but I'm hiring for growth. I don't think I've ever seen an employee deliver instant growth or
Mm.
potentially ever growth. It's a whole combination of things that develop growth. So this idea that, oh, an employee should pay you back in 6 years and make 5 times their salary, it doesn't happen. So I think it's process and good business, and the people play a supporting role. And then on the other side, you see these companies, particularly in tech, raise money, hire so many people. Oh, look at us; it's all like a badge of honor. We've got 1,000 employees, and then very quickly they quietly shed 1,000 jobs as well. And that's what happens. We took money, put on heaps of staff. Now we've decided that we're going to become more efficient, put a positive spin on it, and get rid of a whole bunch of people because we got it wrong. And you're 100% right in saying that, particularly in e-commerce or any business really, marketing and wages are going to be your two highest. I'm talking not including stock. I'm talking about your operating costs, probably followed by freight in e-commerce, something like that. And you get in this trap. If you pull it away from marketing, your revenue drops unless you're spending 60% of your revenue on marketing, in which case you're just burning cash.
You've got
But
other problems, my friend.
yeah, you've got other problems. But if you're reasonably efficient with your marketing, and then you're sort of told, like you would have heard this before, hey Mal, can you can you bring marketing spend from 18% down to 10 and just keep sales the same? Well, that just doesn't really happen. And nor should it. You've got to keep the lights on, and you've got to actually try and keep growing. So that does leave people as the obvious one. But bosses, employers have an obligation to just not be so reckless with hiring. It just happens all the time. Unfortunately, the Iconic let go some people, 60 people or something, a month or two ago. That kind of had me paying a little bit of attention. The CEO, Eric, has just left. I'm a little bit like, okay, what's happening? So as I said before, like nobody really ever turns around and says, yeah, we let go 100 people or 1,000 people, and surprise, we've made record sales. Bad, where there's smoke, there's fire. Bad news generally follows that. And it's no surprise, there's no shame. We are in a tough economic climate at the moment. People are spending far less than they were, but people have got to be responsible with other people's lives and not give out jobs willy-nilly.
Absolutely. Look, I think that's really something where, my recommendation in those cases is always like, no one ever complains about, you generally complain that you didn't do it fast enough. I find a lot of those situations as well, that if you start seeing that situation happen, unfortunately, you do actually need to make some tough calls, in this, to actually realize that, okay, do you know what? Our wage bill is probably looking a little bit high. We're going to make some cuts now, particularly if we don't see, because we tend to be overly positive about things, to look at, next month is going to be better. The month after that's going to be better. It's going to take like 3 months for us to get out of the dip. But the reality is, who knows?
You borrow money to get through that slump as well.
Yeah. And that can put a lot of businesses in a very, very tough position.
Even think about somebody who's starting a business, like, this would be my weekly plug, but in my book, I talk about when to hire your first employee, but before that, when to leave your job. And I always sort of say, like, if you ever, you see someone who started a business making a bit of traction, they're like, when can I leave my job? And my answer is never. Why would you want to leave your job? Keep it going, build it up, feed your business. But people are in such a hurry, and you will hear this all the time. I quit my job and so did my partner. Like, whoa, why did you do that? You should be able to really, at the entry level, get to at least $50,000 a month in sales, having no employees. But it's sort of like ingrained in us. I don't know if it's a status thing that, we've got to have a team. We've got to have, I think there's just this hire fast mentality. And then, fire fast, fire faster.
And I think that's probably a topic for another time, in terms of just like, looking at the different stages of growth of any business. When you're at the startup phase, at what point does it cease to become a hobby business and it becomes a lifestyle business, to then becoming, your main business?
Yeah. When to build wages into your P&L, and
exactly.
And that's another thing most new businesses don't do, and even some established ones. There's no wages for the owners or the directors in the P&L. So yeah, that's probably one for another time.
Fantastic. That's all we got time for. If anyone watching this has any suggestions for what we can call this, let us know in the comments.
Or if you want us to talk about something that you've seen in the news, for sure.
Absolutely. All right, Paul. See you later.
See you, Mel.